Centering the transpose line. So right now I have no symmetry on. I'm pressing W for my transpose line. When I click the white circle, it centers in the middle of the geometry. So I could click the green circle to align it to the world axis. When I draw out my transpose tool again, now you see that the red, blue and green circles are not aligned to the world axis. They are actually aligned to the transpose line. If I now were to press the white circle, you see that my transpose line now is in the center, but it still has the axis of my original selection. So that is something to be aware of. So if I want my transpose line to be in the center but also have the axis of the world coordinates, then I can drag my transpose line off my geometry, and now you see that the green axis point up and the red x-axis points sideways. Or I could simply click and drag and hold shift while over the geometry, and it also snaps to world coordinates. Then let go and then press the white dot. And by pressing the white dot, the action line has gone off center, so I can simply click the green circle since they have the world coordinates. Now my action line is completely at the center of my topology, and if I want to work with X symmetry, for instance, simply press the X key, and now I am working with symmetry. So if I click the X axis, press the E key, for instance, to scale, I'm scaling completely from the center, or Alt with a fall off, just like that. So dragging out the transpose line, as long as you're over geometry, the axes are not aligned to the world axis. If you drag off your geometry, the axes do get aligned. So dragging back on, you see that the axes, the red, green and blue axes, are adjusting according to the direction of the transpose line. If I drag off, it will be aligned, and then I click the axis circles to align the transpose line to whatever I want. And if I want a certain part or certain direction of my transpose line and want to keep that, then I click the white circle, and because I have axis symmetry on, it will position itself over here. So again, without X symmetry, for instance, I want my axis to be like that. Click the white circle, my axis stay like that, but my start of my transpose line is centered now. I could now position my transpose line, I'm sorry about that, I always say transport, it is transpose line, to the y-axis, turn on X symmetry, and you see that my transpose line has a local axis now, but the starting point is completely in the center. So that is one way to use with the Y circle. You can also make selections. So when I go to my draw mode and make a selection, for instance, like that, now draw out my transpose line and click the white circle. Now it is being centered in my selection, and when I unhide the rest, maybe it's more visible when I do it like that. So when I click the white circle, unhide the rest, you see that the transpose line has been centered to my selection. And the third method is by making a mask. So for instance, I want that part invert the mask, draw out my transpose line, click the white circle, and now it is centered within the unmasked part. So these are different ways to center your transpose line. And as explained, important is whether you hover over your geometry with your endpoint and let go, then your axes are local. When you click and drag off the geometry, you see your axes are global. That is something to remember. And you can, of course, if you stay over the geometry, also hold the shift key, and then you see it snaps to global coordinates. The transpose line is also very useful for masking your geometry. So it doesn't matter whether you're in move mode, scale mode, or rotate mode, but when you activate one of those modes and when you hold down the control key and then click and drag on your model, then you start to mask it out, just like that. Now it may happen that when you go further than this, that it does not continue to grow the mask. That's no problem. All you need to do is just go a bit further. So when I control click again and drag, you see now it masks further. So I could have started my drawing over here. So control click and drag, and you see. So when I start over here and drag, then it stops. But when I start over here, then I can go all the way to the sphere if I want to. If I just want to start again, hold down control, and for instance from here, click and drag, and you see now that is the result. So masking with transpose, and depending on whether you're doing this or that, you get different results from how you want to draw out a mask. Masking with the transpose line, very useful. When you go to your brush palette by pressing the B key and then the T key, the T for transpose, then you see you have a transpose brush, but also a TransposeSmartMask brush. So when you select this, and right now I have an alpha, I'm going to turn alpha off. Now when I control click and drag, you get a weird mask. When I do it from here, get another result. Clear the mask. This is a brush that is very useful with an alpha. So for instance, alpha 5, when I now click and drag, then I'm drawing out an alpha. Now if I want to reposition it and I'm still holding the control key, I also press the space bar, and now I can reposition that alpha. Just like that. When I let go of the space bar, I can continue to shape the mask like that. Now let go of control and the pen, and you see the draw mode. I have a nice special alpha. It does go all the way through. Backface mask is not possible in my experience, so you have to clean up if you don't want the backside. Now let's say I want to add another, so I can hold control and then shift. Oh, and first I have to go to move mode. Press Control, then Shift, click and drag, and also space now. So I'm holding Control, Shift and space to reposition that alpha. Let go of space while still holding Control and Shift. And then I can resize it. Let go of everything. Press the Q key to go to draw mode, and I have added to that masking. And of course, if I don't want the backside, I have to clear the mask from the backside. So BT Transport Smart Mask Brush. Just also a little extra about the Transpose Smart Mask. So right now I have my regular masking transport selected, so BT Transpose. When I drag out my transpose, you see that it will go to the arms, if you will. If I go up higher, it will also select part of the arms. But when I select my Transpose Smart Mask, earlier I've shown when you control click over here, then you get this kind of result, but I have symmetry active. So you'd expect it to be symmetrical. In order to be symmetrical, you have to be in the middle. So when your cursor is in the middle, hold Control, click and drag, and now it is symmetrical. And if I don't go too far, you see with Transpose Smart Mask, it does not mask out the arms. Press the Q key, and I can, of course, with other masking brushes, continue to select or mask everything. Of course, this is a simple example. Could have done that with the mask lasso anyway. So you see it is a different behavior with Transpose Smart Mask than with the regular Transpose tool. Previously, I've shown you that you can find the Transpose line and the TransposeSmartMask line in the brush palette. So when you press the B key and then the T key for transpose, you see Transpose and Transpose Smart Mask. In other words, those are brushes. And since they are brushes, they also have brush settings. So I have my brush palette open in my left tray. And over here I have curve. And when you click Edit Curve, you can edit the curve. So first I'm going to draw out my move transpose line. So I'm pressing W for move. And for instance, draw out my line like that. Now, as shown previously, when I hold Alt and click the end dot, that is my result. Control Z to undo, or maybe I will take a snapshot and place it over here. Shows Shift S, Control Z. Now, if I change this curve, I will get a different result. So, for instance, I will pull that one all the way up there. And now you see, instead of a curve like that, it now makes a curve like that. Control Z. So I can add points. So for instance, if I drag that dot off and drag it back on, now it's sharp. Put it all the way down there. Add another one. Pull it off and pull it back in. Again, another one. Maybe something like that. Now press the Alt key and do this. You see, now I'm moving completely different according to that curve. And of course, the same works for the other modes. So when I press the E key for scale, and now for instance press the all middle circle, that is what I get. Of course, my transpose line was not centered, so maybe a better result would be something like this. So Alt middle circle, and you get a nice profile. And I put it up like that, and it's more centered. Maybe put that a bit in, and that a bit in. Alt, but you get the idea. So the transpose line is a brush, and accordingly you can edit its curve. So when I want to reset it, it was something like that originally, I think. I'm not sure. Anyway, when you can save out different brushes like that. So Control Z to undo, Alt. So that was the original kind of, but you can save out the different ones. So if you find a curve, you can save that curve and load it. And if you have certain profiles, that can quickly speed up your workflow. So maybe something like that. Alt. Just like that. So the transpose line is a brush. It has also accordingly brush settings, and especially the curve is very important to achieve different effects. So maybe rotate, first Control Z, rotate. So the rotate also has with that curve, so you see a different curve and different results. Earlier, I've shown you that you can duplicate the geometry with transpose line. So when you activate, for instance, the move tool, draw out your transpose line, control, and I'm also going to hold shift to constrain to an axis. So control shift, click the middle one and drag out. You duplicate your geometry. That is something that I've shown you. But you can also extrude with the transpose line. So when I first create, for instance, a mask over here, you control click the canvas to invert the mask. Now press W for the move tool again, and when I click on a vert, the transport line will be adjusted to the normal of the transport line. Now when I hold control and click the middle circle, now I will make an extrusion. If I wanted to extrude again with the same amount, I could hit the replay last button. So replay last, again. Press the Q key to go to draw mode, drop my mask. So now I have several extrusions. So when I smooth out a bit, it will be more visible, several extrusions. I'm gonna press Ctrl Z. I can also, and I'm pressing W again for the move tool, Control click the end dot, and then I will tear off that part. So Control click, and now I will tear off that part. Since those vertices are also masked probably by the mask, you get that offset a bit. So I could simply hold Control, click the middle circle and not drag it. Now go to draw mode, drop my mask, and I'm going to select those polygons. Press Ctrl Shift A. Oh yeah. So like that. Ctrl Shift A. So you see, with Ctrl Shift A, you select all attached geometry. So you see that that geometry has been. And I'm going to press Ctrl W to make it a polygroup. Now, when I press W for the transpose line, Control click on that polygroup, the rest is masked, and now I can move it further away without the borders being left behind. So with the transpose line you can duplicate geometry as shown earlier, and you can also make an extrusions. And an important thing to note is that just like with duplicating geometry, you cannot have subdivision levels. Well, you can have subdivision levels, but then you have to freeze them. So when I create my mask, or first I'm going to duplicate my subdivision levels. So pressing Ctrl D, now I have 1, 2 subdivision levels. When I make mask, Control click to invert it, W for my move tool, click to align the transpose tool, Control middle circle. I'm just moving that unmasked part. So I could hit freeze subdivision level. ZBrush drops to the lowest subdivision level. Now control click the middle part, and now I'm making an extrusion. Maybe do another one with replay last and another one. Go to draw mode, clearing my mask. Now when I click freeze subdivision level again, ZBrush is going to go back to the subdivision levels as previously and reproject the previous high level detail. So I could smooth that out now. Zoom in a bit so you see. So if you have subdivision levels, then you have to press freeze subdivision level in order to duplicate geometry and in order to tear off. When duplicating a mesh, I can also hold the Alt key together with the Control key, and then ZBrush will make that duplicate a negative mesh. So as you can see in my geometry tool palette, I have Dynamesh on, and with Dynamesh you can have negative meshes that will subtract. So what does this mean? So I'm pressing W for the move tool, press Control. I'm also pressing Shift to constrain to the axis, and now also Alt, so Control, Shift, Alt. And now when I click and drag the middle circle, you see that I drag out a copy, but it has a white poly group, meaning this is now a negative mesh. So when I press the Q key to go to draw mode and Control, click and drag to re-Dynamesh, or first clear my mask and then Control, click and drag to re-Dynamesh, you see now that the white part is being subtracted from the original. So Control Z to undo. So drag out your move tool, press Control to duplicate, Alt to make it a negative mesh, and Shift to constrain it to the axis. And then you get a duplicate that is a negative. So when I clear the mask and re-Dynamesh, it is being subtracted, which is very interesting for quickly creating a shell. So I could first mask this, and I'm in scale mode, scale it down a bit, move it down, W, move it down, whatever your needs. This is not a very good example. U, re-Dynamesh, and you create a shell. So duplication with Control and Transpose line while holding the Alt key makes your duplicate a negative Dynamesh. Let's also take a look at the preferences for Transpose. So on the left I have my preferences palette open. So you see preferences, and with the Transpose part you have circle radius, so you can increase or decrease the circle radius. Usually leave it at 20. With 3D on, the circles actually grow bigger and smaller according to how you're zoomed in. When you turn 3D off, they all remain the same size. So with 3D off, you don't have kind of perspective, you just always leave that on. It's not that big a deal, but actually you can see that because this circle is bigger than that circle now, that it goes into the deep. With axis length, you can adjust the length of the axes. So when I increase this, you see that the axes are a lot bigger. I also usually don't touch this just leave it at 80. And zoom in again with show alignment dial. So right now you see there is no white circle because show alignment dial is off. When I click it down, you have the white circle. Then you have snap max distance. That is something that I have covered before. So when you set it to 0, you will have no vertex snapping. When you set it to 25, for instance, and that is pixel dependent, so it will snap, and the lower the setting, the less it will snap. So you have to zoom in with dense geometry or lower your snap max distance. So when I set it to 1, for instance, now you can drag it over here, and it will take a while before it snaps. You see it snap to geometry, but I also can place it in between the vertices. So with the higher snap max distance, it will be harder to put, and I have to drag it out again, so harder to put the endpoint in between vertices. Then you have rotation steps. That is also a very important part. So for instance, when I go to the R for rotate, drag out my transpose line. So right now I have 4 steps. So if I hold Alt, then I can rotate with a fall off, Control Z to undo. But when I hold Shift Alt, you see that it now snaps to those rotation steps. So if I set the rotation step to 1, hold Alt and Shift, Alt, Shift, and now click, I have to drag far before it snaps. So it's only 1 snap. When you set it to 2, then of course you have 2 steps, like that. When I set it to, for instance, 10, then I have 36 degree angles. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So very important setting, that one. If you want to control snapping to a certain angle, very useful, just like that. Then you have your max blur strength. So this controls how much, when you control click and drag, the blur is. So the higher the setting, this is now 24, so when I set it to 100, then I have a much finer blur. So set it back to 24. Sharpen strength, this controls how much with control clicking the mask will be sharpened. So it's 7, I set it to 100, then it will be normally very sharp. But I also have my blur strength, so when I set that to 0 and my mask sharpen strength to 100, then it should be a very sharp mask. So you see it's indeed a very sharp mask. So self-explanatory. So mask blur 24, mask sharpen 7, and then you have a few settings that I don't often use. What do those mean? So you have align action line to axis. So with this off, when I'm going to turn off X symmetry for now, it's not that important that it is on, clear my mask. So when I'm right now looking to in the front of the geometry, when I click and drag my action line and let go, and now go to the top view, you see that because I have snapping on, snap max distance is on, that start point has been snapped to that vertex, and that endpoint has been snapped to a vertex over there. And when you go to the top view, you see that the action line goes from here to there. When you turn Align Action Line to Axis on, then my action line will remain straight. So let me do that again. So when I click and drag my action line now, it does snap, but it does not move the endpoint in the Z direction. So you can see now that my action line remains straight. So this is also an important setting depending on how you want to position your transpose line. So if you do not want it to remain straight, then you turn that off. When you click and drag, go to the top view, and then should align action line to axis, which remains straight, and now it should. I'm pressing the shift key, then of course it's going to snap to a right angle. So it is off, and I have this habit of pressing the shift key, but when you turn that off, align action line to axis, not pressing the shift key, you see now my action line is not straight anymore from the top view. The same with the mask line. So when I press Ctrl and drag out my mask line and go to the top, you see it's not straight. It goes from that vertex to that vertex. Drop that mask. When I turn on Align Mask Line to Axis, now press Ctrl and go over there. Now my line has remained straight. So depending on how you want to use this, with the masking I almost never use it. The Align Action Line to Axis button is something that I use more often, but as just shown you, when you press the Shift key you will straighten it anyway. So with this off and dragging, it's from vertex to vertex, but when you press the Shift key it will be straight anyway with that off. Then enable Transpose Inflate. Transpose Inflate is with the Move tool, so W for Move. When you enable this with the right mouse button, click the endpoint, you will inflate. When you click this off, then right mouse button and then you will simply move. So the inflate will not occur. So I usually leave that on. So right mouse button, click and drag and inflate. And then you also have the enable transpose trim. So with your move transpose line, now when I click this starts, I'm again moving. And with enable transpose trim on now, and I should make that the starting point. Now I'm trimming like that. So those are always on, and usually leave these on as well. Oh no, Align Action Line to Axis is something that I usually turn off, so that when I click and drag, that my action line actually follows the direction from that vert to that vert. And when I want it to be straight anyway, with that setting off, I press the Shift key to make it straight anyway. So that are the preference settings of the transpose line. So in this part I will cover transpose units. This is probably going to be the last part of the tutorial. If I find anything interesting about the transpose line, I will record a new video. So what are transpose units? When you go to Preferences, then you have Transpose, and you also have Transpose units. Now I have docked Preferences palette in my left tray. So let me draw out a transpose line. So let's say that I want the diameter of that circle to be a unit. Then I draw out the transpose line. go to calibration distance and set that to 1. Now we see in the upper left corner of the interface 1 units. You can change the name of units if you want that to be or represent a centimeter. Then you can press set units and call this, for instance, cm. Now you see on the upper left corner 1 centimeter. That's what, according to your desires, I never change that. Anyway, you can if you want to. And right now I'm going to drag off the transpose line so it's a bit more visible on the screen. So now, right now I have 10 minor ticks and 1 major tick. So 1 major tick means that I have now 1 tick from here to there, and you see that's the line over here in the inner red circle. When I set it to 0, that line has disappeared, that major tick. When I set it to 2, I have 1 over here and 1 over here, so I have 1 major tick, 2 major ticks. So I increase this at my heart's content. This can be useful if you want to make finer measurements. In the minor ticks, you can set those to 0, so now I have 1 major tick, 1, and 0 minor ticks. I can set those to 2, for instance. Now I have 1, 2 minor ticks. And this is something you can change to make measurements. Very handy if you want to, for instance, measure how many heads a character is high, how long an arm is, and so on. And with adjusting the minor ticks and the major ticks, you can have divisions of the unit to make measurements. So that is all about the transpose line. As said before, if I find anything interesting about the transpose line that is worth mentioning, I will record another video. So bye for now. This was Dominic.